What I focus on is brand equity, and that's what's the value of that brand. When I started out, it was thought of that brand was image and awareness, and that is easily delegated to an ad agency and easily administered by middle management. So what I did was to add brand loyalty to the concept of brand equity, and that really changed everything because brand loyalty involves the whole customer journey. It involves all the R&D and so forth. It involves segmentation, and it involves all elements of business strategy. So that meant that there was now a seat at the executive suite, and they just didn't before.
Hi, I'm Nick Hague, and welcome to the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from a true legend in the field of marketing and branding, David Aaker. David's often referred to as the father of modern branding for his groundbreaking work that shaped how businesses approach brand management. With an impressive career spanning over several decades, he's authored numerous influential books, including Building Strong Brands and Brand Leadership, and have contributed invaluable insights to what makes brands not just successful, but also enduring. In today's conversation, we'll explore David's journey in the marketing world, delve into his renowned brand equity model, and discuss the changing landscape of branding in our rapidly evolving digital environment. We'll also touch on key trends that are shaping the future of branding and get his expert advice for entrepreneurs looking to make their own mark. David's one of the most respected people in branding today, so I just know you'll love this conversation. And as always, please do subscribe along with the other 100,000 people who listen and watch, as it really does make a massive difference to us. Welcome to the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast, David.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, your name was put forward. Not that I needed your name to be put forward, because you'll see I've got more than a couple of books, but a couple of books that you can see on the shelf here. But Philip Kotler, a good friend of yours, he calls you the father of modern branding, and he put your name forward a few episodes ago. So I need to thank Phil for that. But to start with, it would be great if you could just share some background to your career. What inspired you to pursue a career in marketing and branding?
Well, I'm an example of somebody that benefited from kind of being all over the map. I graduated with a PhD in marketing, but I was a statistician. And so I did my early work with statistical models. I did some models that mostly around advertising and branding, but I was a statistician. And then I wrote a book on marketing research with George Day. And but then I got into advertising. I was always interested in advertising and the challenges of analyzing what communication you need and so on. And so I wrote a book on advertising, did a lot of my statistical work related to advertising. But then I had a latent interest in business strategy. So I started teaching a course in strategy and wrote a book on strategy that became um, used a lot in classrooms, strategic market management. And and uh, and so there I was, and actually along the way I did some research on consumer behavior as well. We explored the warmth emotion and in advertising, and so I was kind of all over the map. I had published a lot, but they had no continuity. I even did a book on consumerism, consumer protection, and and so I was very ill-defined, very not well branded at all. And then in the late '80s, um, what, that was sort of the decade of short-termism, and it was really driven by two really powerful conceptual models. One was the BCG growth share matrix, which said that an empirically verified hypothesis that market share is a key variable to look at strategically. that you want to be in attractive markets, those with high growth,
Yeah.
and you wanted to have a good position in those markets, which is measured by market share. And so, as a result of that, at one point, something like 40% of the Fortune 500 were explicitly using this model to guide their strategy, explicitly. But everybody was trying to increase market share. And never mind how you did it, never mind how you damaged brands, but that's what you did. And then in the mid 80s, another phenomenon came out, and that was uh, guided by the fact we had scanner data for the first time. So now you could scientifically manage marketing, and it'll be, none of this subjective and judgment shit. We're going to manage you like we manage everything else. And so they did experimentation. They had test cities where they knew they could control the advertising exposure on TV, and they could measure the next day sales. And what they learned was that sense off promotions uh, was the only thing that rang the bell. So there was a big thrust into sense off promotions. And what they did was to teach the marketplace that price was the only thing that mattered. And if it wasn't on sale now, it soon would be. They destroyed brands. They achieved no growth, and they destroyed profits.
Yeah.
So at the end of the 80s, people kind of were looking around. The strategists, the top managers were saying, it's not working, and we need something else. And along that time, the concept of brand equity emerged. And so it was the right time at the right place, and nobody had defined brand equity. So I wrote a book defining it. Managing Brand Equity was the title, and it says had something like 65,000 sites, that book. And then after that, people said, all right, I agree that brand equity is important. How do you manage it? And I wrote a book called Building Strong Brands, and that's at 25,000 sites. So those two books, I was just at the right place at the right time with the right background, because I could apply my market research, I could apply my advertising knowledge, I could apply the business strategy knowledge, and it all came. I was in a uniquely favorable position to doing that.
Yeah.
So that's what happened.
And looking back on that time, Dave, who were the thinkers or mentors in those early stages of your career who most influenced your perspective on marketing and branding, or even from that statistical background?
Wow, that's a good question. There was a person that's really influenced me is Peter Drucker,
Yeah,
and his emphasis on consumer-driven innovation and differentiation. Um, and uh, Michael Porter came out with in the midst of this discreditation of his work and others, he came out with a book in 1985 that said there's three ways to compete: low cost, differentiation, and niche. And
yeah,
of course, differentiation and niche require branding thinking, although he never used that word, I don't think. But uh, they kind of set the stage and provided sort of an acceptance of the or the a willingness to accept the brand equity concept.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, extremely. We're all extremely grateful for the work that you've done, because before branding wasn't this sophisticated strategic discipline that we know today. At least we could start to apply rigorous analytical frameworks from an economics and a quantitative marketing background to the problem of branding. It allowed us, like you say, it wasn't just airy fairy stuff that was with the BCG before that. Your your early work. Well, actually, I think maybe as a starting point, let's start with the basics, just for the listeners. I'd be interested in, because there's many definitions of a brand, isn't there? So, what's your definition of a brand, and why it's so important to have a strong brand?
Well, I haven't used the concept brand very much. I mean, a brand is something that indicates who stands behind or who made the product or who stands behind the service. But what I focused on is brand equity, and that's what's the value of that brand.
Yeah.
And so when I started out, I had it was thought of that brand was image and awareness, and that is easily delegated to an ad agency and easily administered by middle management. So what I did was to add brand loyalty to the concept of brand equity, and and that really changed everything because brand loyalty involves the whole customer journey. It involves all the R&D and so forth. It involves segmentation, and it involves all elements of business strategy. So that meant that there was now a seat at the executive table for marketing, and we now had CMOs and we had VPs of marketing that sat in the executive suite, and they just didn't before.
Yeah.
And uh, so anyway, that's my take. It's what brand equity is, and it should include brand loyalty.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's that aha moment that came about, I suppose, where people saw that brand isn't this expense; it's this asset that you invest in. It's like any asset, you measure it, you can manage it, and you can hold your strategy accountable for it. And that I think that was that massive shift when you started talking about brand equity, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think yeah, it was, and of course it wasn't just me. There were others, but um, that was really a turning point in not only branding but in marketing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yourself and me, Dave, we have a similar background in that I'm a career market researcher before I was running this podcast. So I've done many studies, many customer experience studies, but many branding studies, and I think using multivariate analysis, conjoint analysis, in order to have a look at where brand sits and how much utility value it holds against some of those other product or service features. It
Mhm.
really is, it's eye opening sometimes how much a brand can really deliver in terms of value, isn't it? When you start looking and slicing and dicing those surveys.
Well, you mentioned conjoint and other statistical analysis. One of the warnings that I occasionally have a chance to talk about is this experience in the '80s when the era of data and analytics sort of was born, and it led to some very dysfunctional brand destructive activity. And I think that we see that now. It's sort of reemerging. It's getting some life with something called demand marketing and performance marketing and so
Yeah,
on, which it puts a clever brand, um, you know, umbrella over something that is dangerous because it can lead you to have short-term sales and other short-term measures like leads and clicks and so on to dominate the analysis. And because when you look at data, that's so handy and that's so reliable and valid.
yeah.
And so it's what you measure, and so you have to worry about that becoming too dominant again.
No, absolutely. I think people are obsessed, aren't they, with this short termism of results now. Get the money in, as opposed to building that brand for the future. And I think that's where your most recent book, your excellent book, Acron Branding, the second edition, you introduce us to this new branding framework called the 5 Bs that recognizes, yes, that brands are assets and they drive strategy, but there's these 5 components to it. Would you be able to talk the listener through these, Dave, and why they're
Sure,
important for
sure.
modern brand building fundamentals?
Yeah, and the motivation for this was this short-termism, and I'm asked frequently, what can I do to build and leverage and protect my brand in this light? Because people demand short-term results now more than before, And again, it's driven a lot by big data and analytics. And it's no fault of the people that offer data and analytics, because it's kind of like AI. There's enormous good that can come from that, but it can be misused as well. And so anyway, I talk about the fact that we know that brand equity pays off. If you increase brand equity, you can increase ROI and stock price. I've done econometric research to show that. We have all these case studies that vividly show that it can do magic. And and the bottom line is, you ask yourself, what does your business strategy need to succeed? What brand assets? And they will tell you, we need these brand assets. So uh, we know that. And then we know the this 80s period where the short-termism resulted in in the absence of growth and the destruction of profits. So we know all that. But still, in all, there's this demand marketing out there. And again, and the tendency is to drift back to branding is just about awareness and image. So I wanted to make the statement that it's more than that. It's a lot more breadth and a lot more depth. And so I developed this 5B as a mechanism to do that. And you know, I, I, I can tell you, and you will agree, I think, that if you don't brand it, it's pretty hard to communicate. Without
Yeah.
a brand, it's hard to communicate. So anyway, the first B is the fact that brands are equity. It's not it's not something that is a communication task. You're building up an asset that you will use to leverage to build future growth. Second and third and fourth are the three elements of brand equity. And the first is no longer brand awareness, and now brand relevance, because I did a lot of work on brand relevance, and what I came to believe is that you no longer have to. It's not enough to be visible. You have to be visible in a certain context. If you make hybrid cars and people are buying electric cars, you got to be visible in the electric end of things as well. And you have to be credible as well as just visible. There can't be any reason not to consider you. So we're talking about brand relevance, which is a much more strategic concept. And the second thing is, in brand image, we have to be careful not to just talk about functional benefits, but it's also self-expressive benefits, social benefits, emotional benefits. And but then and we have to be careful to make sure that people realize that brand loyalty is part of brand equity. I
Mm.
mean, the value of a brand is really the value of your installed customer base, how large it is and how much loyalty is there. So we have to be concerned with the customer journey and the ways that you can link the brand to the customer by making sure they respect it, that they admire it, that they're inspired by it, and so on. But I add a fifth B because I think this is the most misunderstood element of branding, and the place where there's the most opportunity for often inexpensive short-term benefit, and that's to understand that a brand doesn't stand alone. There's a team of brands that has to work together. So you have endorser brands, you have sub brands, you have co-brands, and you have what I call branded energizers, branded differentiators, and branded source of credibility. And all these are needed by a brand to tell a story. You know, I talk about Uniqlo. I'm just writing a little blog post on Uniqlo again. It's a company that was really struggling in 2000, which they were engaged in an enormous increase in stores and so forth, and they were trying to get out from under this image of being a low price uh, retailer
Yeah.
because they had breathtakingly low price, and no matter what they did, they that was their image. And so what they did is to start a program that involved branding. First of all, they just made the decision that they would become a fabric innovator, and they will develop new fabrics that were responsive to customers' needs. And they branded them. The first one is called Heat Tech. It kept you fabric that kept you warm in the winter. And then there was Aerism, fabric that kept you cool in the summer. And there was about three or four others, branded fabrics. And that really told their innovation, their quality, their ability to respond to customers' needs, and and something that they had tried to do, but that really was something that was needed. Those branded fabrics, and then they were. With all this growth in these big flagship stores, they wanted to keep their fundamentals uh, right about the culture of the company. So they started to brand elements of the culture. One was Global One, where everybody is working with a global company now, and we want to share information. We want to do cross country task force and so on. And so that was one, and the other was called a Zenin um, Kea Kea, Kea Ea, Kea Ea, Zenin Kea Ea. And what that meant was that everybody at in those stores are managers. They're all executives. They all have the power to not only make decisions, but to implement them.
Yeah.
They, and and so it really changes everything, because now there used to be or in many firms there's a bureaucracy that you have to go through if you want to make a change, especially a change in the way you're handling customers, the way you lay out the store, and or the way the logistics are done. But this gives permission for everybody to do that. And then they still had trouble, so they ended up branding the business. And they couldn't use the brand Uniqlo because, first of all, it was too Japanese. Second of all, it was too low price, oriented. It was a retailer brand, and they need something that was more of a higher purpose. So they developed something called a Lifewear, and that was a brand that encompasses all that's special uh, about Uniqlo, including a higher purpose. That they're really in business to let the customer achieve the best they can achieve, and to help them along that process. And it's grown to include sustainability. So now they have a whole sustainability program where they will take in and repair your clothing so you can use it longer and you don't have to buy new ones. And uh, and so they also have a dimension that involves this in-store experience, which was always there, but it was never in some kind of an umbrella brand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great example actually, because I'm a tennis nut. I love tennis, and actually the Uniqlo brand, it in this time of I suppose influencers and how they impact on brands. Then they started sponsoring Novak Djokovic, didn't they? And then famously Roger Federer, he left Nike to go with them at the end of his career, and so that started to elevate the brand as well in terms of its positioning as well. So they went in lots of different directions
Yeah,
in order
I'm a
to.
tennis player too. Anyway,
Yeah. But no, and I think again, going back to the 5 Bs, we've got this umbrella asset, the brand equity that we're talking about here. The fact that it is, a strategic asset. It drives the health and growth of the company. But then sitting underneath it, I really liked the fact that it's not just awareness now. Awareness only gets you so far. That brand relevance, where it's got to be visible and credible, is really important. And then, as you just described, loyalty, obviously the image. I've got a couple of questions on that, but this wider portfolio of how brands play into building up that equity, it really does give some structure and guidance for companies and brands when they're looking to manage that strategy. Should Should businesses approach their brand strategy differently today in this increasingly digital and competitive age we're in? And if so, are there new ingredients for success, or is it still the same, David?
It's well, it's both. It's there's a lot of the fundamentals are the same, but there's two aspects of the age we're in it that really impacts on branding. The first one is the fact that uh, we're facing such a hostile communication environment. There is enormous information overload. There's just too much noise out there. There is enormous skepticism of all kinds of institutions, but brands and in the industries that they're in are right up there. So you've got, and then there's clutter, and there's audience that are now in control. They're not sort of passive viewers of whatever comes their way. They're actively can control that. So those three things add up to a very different environment that we had before. And there's three things I advise people that are dealing with that. The first is that the days of sort of having a communication brief where you want to communicate A, B, and C, and let's please do that by telling people about A, B, and C. That's over. You've got to have something that will attract them and hold their attention, and you have to have something that will distract them from counter arguing. So that means there's a big premium for uh, doing things that are really intriguing or um, very emotional or very humorous and entertaining. And you look at people that are successful now, a lot of them have found a way to build their message into that. Um, Emotional social story, and there's several examples of that in the book, or something humorous, like the male Hellman's mayonnaise that did these commercials where there was football players, American football players, tackling a grandmother who was about to throw away food, and they had a make taste not waste program that you shouldn't waste food, and it was just hilarious, and that got over 7 billion views.
Yeah.
So you stop at that. If you start talking about the advantages of my mayos versus your mayonnaise, and it's got better components. I mean, you're not going to get 600 views to say nothing of 6 billion.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The second thing is that when you do get through, when you do break through, what you have to do, I think, is to change your orientation from just communicating A, B, and C to creating some what I call cognitive anchors. Creating some things with equity that will mean that what you're saying is going to have a long term life. It will be not only be memorable, but there'll be a hook in your uh, mind that will remember it. Now, this could be a brand like Heat Tech or Aerism, or it could be a tagline like um, the driving machine of BMW, and it could be a visual symbol. Or it could be a story or some combination. One of my favorite stories is about an appliance company in China that was going out of business, and a middle manager took over, and he uh, found a customer a couple weeks in that had a defective appliance. So he took him to the warehouse to learn that something like 40% of the appliances were defective. So he took all those appliances to the shop floor, and he got a sledgehammer, and he had his employees smash them. And he said, "That's it. From now on, we're building quality stuff that's going to have no defects." And that's that story. And the sledgehammer as a symbol is now in a museum in their home office. And that story, uh, you know, supports them today. They're now the largest manufacturer of appliances in the world. It's Hague,
Yeah.
and that's where it started. So so the point is that's a cognitive anchor. It's something that will make that thing stay with you and influence you going forward.
Yeah.
And finally, I think that a lot of things that we've worked with in the past are elevated in their importance. And I'm thinking of very familiar things like sponsorships, like the FedEx Cup, for example, which is in golf, not tennis, but it has enormous impact. The big customers of FedEx can come and sit in the inner tent and meet the celebrities and it gets enormous visibility and gets an image kick. Another thing is events, like Ericsson, the company that makes uh, uh, gadgets that will help you control the temperature in your house to save energy. Ericsson, and they uh, they have a contest each year. Who uses their products best to save energy? And uh, they uh, they got 240 applicants last year, and they had 7 awards. And they came to New York, and there was a big ceremony, and they got a lot of visibility for their work, and they got to share the results of others and use them if they could in their own firm. And I mean, this is just a great B&B case, and that's your home base. But um, the point is, they created an event, a branded event,
Yeah.
and they just got a lot of. And just think of the energy, the visibility, the associations, the brand building that came out of that.
Yeah.
Um, and then a third thing I think is increasingly important, and that's the idea of a brand community. I mean, it used to be just Harley Davidson had a motorcycle community, but now you have a lot of people that have been able to craft a community, like Salesforce with their um, community of people that will get together and talk to each other and share problems, solutions, uh, anecdotes, and wants and desires, and just share a common bond.
Yeah.
And they can go to courses and so forth. And I think the idea of a community is more important than ever.
So, I mean, again, some great examples there, Dave. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? When, as marketing managers, or when I was trying to, push our brand, looking at that, you think that customers think about your brand or obsess about your brand just as much as you do, but it's rubbish. They're not interested at all. Okay, they are when they need it, but I mean, they're not thinking about it all the time. So using stories, using sponsorship, riding above or cutting through that noise, it really does help you get noticed, and helps you get remembered as well.
Yeah.
For good or for bad, AI is everywhere in the world of marketing, and so there's a lot of talk about disruptive innovation. And I recently had Scott Anthony on the podcast talking about disruptive innovation, and he comes from the school of Clayton Christensen. And in your book, Aaker on Branding, you rightly point out that even though Clay's book is a fabulous book, The Innovator's Dilemma, he doesn't talk about the role of branding in there. And so I wanted to touch on that. Why do you think branding is ignored when it comes to disruptive innovation? And why do you say it's the secret sauce for innovators?
Well, first of all, the fact that the disruptive innovations kind of exploded has got a lot of impact for businesses in general, but also for branding. So it's always been true that virtually the only way to grow is with disruptive innovation. It's the most extreme form of differentiation, which we know has been a driver forever. And but what it just exploded because of digital, and
Yeah,
AI is part of it, and AI enables new offerings, and AI does other things as well. But it started with with e-commerce and with social media and the Internet of Things, and voice recognition and uh, and and so forth. That whole digital era has enabled a lot of new disruptive innovations to be created. But yes, it's true that if you look at the books like Clayton's book, but also if you look at Blue Ocean, the 5 million book Bible of disruptive innovation, they devote a half a page to branding. And the page talks about first mover advantage, which actually doesn't even exist. Uh, but that's it. It's so uh, they're only little tiny 2 paragraphs is kind of misrepresents, which is a real minor point. But the major point is that it's not about branding. Whereas if you look at this digital innovation, branding is absolutely essential for it to prosper and succeed. And it has 4 jobs to do. And the first job is to position the new disruptive innovation. Somebody has got to say, what is this? And what are its brand pillars? Why should we go to this disruption instead of what we used to do? And you have Salesforce, for example, in 1999 came in with cloud computing, the first software firm to do that. So they had to sell cloud computing. It wasn't that they had to sell Salesforce; they had to sell computing. That it's ongoing upgrades. There's no investment. That it's safe, and in addition, they imbued it with a kind of a personality because they were the feisty outdoor dog. They did these outrageous stunts to call attention to cloud computing. Something like 7 months after they started this, Wall Street Journal said that it nominated them as the spokesman for cloud computing. And they were the exemplar brand.
Yeah.
So that's the first job, because if the disruptive doesn't win, that's the ball game. The
Yeah.
second thing, you have to become the exemplar. You have to be the brand that's going to able to manage the disruptive innovation, not only establish it, but management over time as it evolves. And you have to be ahead of that. And so it helps to be a market leader to do that. It helps if you're a very visible, colorful, feisty underdog kind of personality, because that gives you energy and visibility. But it also helps if you um, have passion for what you're doing. And there's a mattress company called Casper that is is got a passion about sleep. Everybody else in the industry is selling mattresses, telling you they got more springs, they got better technology, they got cheaper price, they got more convenience. Casper talks about sleep.
Yeah.
And somebody that's really focused on sleep is going to make good mattresses. But they're not functional. They're not just saying, come in here and we'll give you a lower price mattress and so on. They're about sleep. So that's a way to become the exemplar brand. And a third thing, you need to scale really fast. We used to talk about uh, uh, pricing high at the beginning to recapture your development costs and so on. And that's a thing of the past. You have to engage in penetration pricing. You gotta forego profits, or even accept losses. You look at Amazon did it for 20 years, and they kept investing, 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 and that's how you stay the market leader. And finally, you got to build barriers to others. Now, if you own the positioning, that's a strong barrier. If you scale and you have a big customer base, that's a strong barrier. But you also have to do things like brand the innovation, like Uniqlo did. You have to uh, continually innovate and evolve, and that's what Uniqlo does with this heat tech. It's been involved, uh, oh, periodically during the last 20 years. and now they have an extra warm heat tech, a medium warm heat tech, an original heat tech, and they've improved the quality of it over time. So it's a moving target. Um, so anyway, yeah, I think that branding is huge in disruptive innovation, and it's um, I don't know why, except it's a bit of a statement on the strategy field in general that have really underestimated the strategic value of brand equity.
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned two books at the beginning there, Dave, and I think Blue Ocean Strategy, as we all know, a very famous book. They're actually updating it next year, and in fact, I've been asked if the authors can come on the show. So I'm assuming they're updating it, and there'll hopefully be some uh, further further conversation in the book around branding. So we'll yet to
Well,
see that.
I wrote a book on disruptive innovation too, called winning game-changing subcategories, and uh, my take is a little different than first of all, that Blue Ocean book is a terrific book. I was inspired by it, and so was a lot of other people. It really established the thing there. Thought leader, and really deserve all kinds of accolades. But their emphasis tends to be on new categories, and my take is that it's much more powerful concept if you talk about subcategories. So within the car business, there's all kinds of subcategories, like the hybrid was a subcategory, the electric car is a subcategory, and within that you have the compact hybrid. So I believe that if you talk about subcategories, you magnify the thrust of the whole concept of disruptive innovation, fivefold, and so that's one of my uh, uh, differences that I have with that book. And then I have my model where you develop must-haves as a framework for doing that. And then the idea that I got from them, I probably is the idea that you're dealing with relevance and not preference.
Yeah, yeah. You you've touched on it already, David, but you're talking in your book about brand energizers, of which brand purpose is now a major focus. So we have touched on that. But which companies do you think are authentically living their purpose today and building equity from it? And where do you see others potentially maybe stumbling into this purpose washing?
Well, there's I think that when I go into a company, or nonprofit or a business company, and I ask them, what's your secret sauce? Why are you special? Why are your employees proud of you? They can usually spend 2 or 3 minutes with an amazingly eloquent description with a lot of passion about why they're special. And then I say, why don't you brand it? And there's sort of silence, and they had never thought of that. Or it maybe even does have a brand, but it's a brand that's sort of hidden. It's not used, it's not resourced, it's not leveraged. So that's sort of the um, sort of really low hanging fruit in almost all businesses. And one way to get there is to ask, what gives you energy, or could give you energy if it was branded? What's your branded energizer? And what's your branded differentiator? And what's your branded source of credibility? And sometimes something is all three, or is two of the three, but any one of those three paths can get you to a place where you can be more differentiated, more energized, and more credible than you now are. But one of my favorite examples is Dove Real Beauty Program,
Mm,
where they took um, something, a social issue that just rang a bell. It just gravitated to people. Women just instinctively know that this was this was really destructive to their self-esteem and their daughters, and and so they just hit a chord, and they took a $2.6 billion industry, and in 17 years grew it to 6.5 billion.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it by talking about Dove soap or Dove shampoo. They did it by talking about the real beauty. And every year it came out with this thing. In 1913, they came out with an ad describing an experiment they did where they had an artist draw a woman's face based on her description of herself versus the same artist drawing a face based on somebody else, a stranger's description. And the stranger's description based sketch was much more attractive. And the tagline is, "You are more beautiful than you think." That ad, or that series of ads, became the most viral ads ever that had ever been done since
Yeah.
1913. The most viral ad ever. Can you imagine? And
Yeah.
anyway, they changed the lives of hundreds of millions of women and girls, and in the process, they delivered so much energy and short-term sales
Yeah.
for the Dove business, and nobody ever accused Dove of doing it just for the money.
Yeah.
They had so much passion, so much long-term commitment, um, and so much real content in what they were doing.
I think
That,
Patagonia is sometimes very different. I know, and I love that Dove story, and especially the background to how they built that campaign around it. It really does resonate. But I, there's a on the shelf there, you can see it behind me. It's got an orange spine on it. It's "Let My People Go Surfing" by Yvon Chouinard. And he talks about, obviously that he had the passion for climbing, but built that into the ethical practices of building Patagonia. But it's a great book, and it talks about how he created the culture, the work culture around personal
well,
fulfillment.
the interesting thing is that he was blessed with a context in which his products could kind of carry the flag.
Yeah,
So his I mean, he did more than just his products, but his products were the centerpiece of what he did. And he had this what did he call it? Anyway, it was a place where you brought clothing back, and he would recycle it or fix it long before Uniqlo did it. And but anyway, a lot of his stuff was oriented around his product. In Dove case, there is no orientation at all around the product. It's completely independent of the product.
yeah,
So uh, it's really interesting to see both examples because they represent sort of polar extremes in that
yeah,
sense.
yeah. Byron Sharp's book, who's also on the shelf, How Brands Grow, he changed the way that I looked at both branding and customer loyalty in his book. He argues that meaning differentiation is largely a myth for most brands, and that the real game is about building mental, physical availability through distinctive assets and salience. From your perspective, David, where is Byron right, and where might he be wrong, or
What distinct assets is he talking about if it's not differentiating?
So he talks about distinctive assets in the fact that he's talking about that customers recognize things like obviously logos, but colors, taglines, jingles, packaging, and he says that these distinctive assets are more important than differentiation.
Well, I think that if the most amazing and robust finding in all of marketing research in the last century. There's one finding that stands out that has been proved again and again and again, and it addresses the following question: what predicts new product success? There's one thing that predicts it again and again. It's how different you are.
Mm.
The extent of differentiation that predicts new product set. That's an empirical fact, and and of course the only I've done a cursory look at category after category, and spurts of growth are almost always caused by disruptive innovation, which is the ultimate form of differentiation.
Yeah.
So to say that differentiation doesn't matter, I mean, I think his frame of reference are mature product categories where there isn't much differentiation. Maybe if you talk about soda pop, or you talk about yogurt, or you talk about cereal, and maybe in those categories there isn't a lot of meaningful differentiation. But if you take a larger perspective, the two facts I just said are true. And so I have a hard time arguing that differentiation doesn't matter when that's the only way to grow.
Yeah.
So if again, he's talking about competing in a mature categories, I think,
Well,
in
and
which
I think also he's talking about that in this quickly, fast moving world that we live in, it was always about this uniqueness where he's saying, well, nothing can really be unique now, but it's all about holding that. I'm with you, David, and I think that there is definitely a position for differentiation. It's about having that different position, that different brand position so you can compete against the competition in the marketplace, and then use distinctive assets along the way in order for your brand to stand out on the shelf or wherever it may be.
well, um, I agree with him in this sense. I started off by saying that we're engaged in a very hostile communication environment, and one of the what I said was that in that environment, when you do get through, you want to do more than just communicate ABC. You want to create a cognitive anchor,
Mm,
and some of the things you mentioned that he uses are cognitive anchors. Something like some logos, some taglines, some visual symbols, some stories, um, some emotions. That can be a cognitive anchor that can be used to help you remember or an impression of a brand.
yeah.
So in that sense, maybe I agree with him.
Yeah. Okay, and another outspoken voice in the world of branding is Scott Galloway, and he argues that the era of brand is over, emphasizing that there's this shift away from emotional brand focused marketing towards more product focused marketing. What's your thoughts on that line of thinking?
Well, I had a colleague that wrote a book once that said branding is dead too, because now people can have access to Google, and they can search and find out all they want about a brand. And well, Scott is a friend of mine, and he actually started out by taking a branding course I wrote, and he mentions that every once in a while. So I'm a big fan of Scott Galloway. But he's almost always right, but not on this one, I don't think. I think that this idea that people can now do research, and they can, if they're going to buy a car, they can get all the specs at hand, and they can use AI and say, analyze these specs and tell me, given my preferences, what car I should buy. Um, so that's sort of the idea. That's the dream. So people don't need branding anymore. It's all going to be objective. You know, the world, since it started, is under the false assumption that people are rational. They make decisions logically, and that they're motivated to to do that, to get decisions. Now, if you're analyzing a car, you go through this process I said, right? Or if you're a B2B company analyzing what airline I should buy from, what airplane manufacturer I should buy from. So you're going to have a team of people looking at all kinds of data. But you know what? At the very bottom line, you're probably going to go with your gut. You're going to go with what's comfortable with you. You really are.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
agree.
first of all, you're going to be kind of overwhelmed. Second of all, it's not going to be clear cut. Third of all, even before you go through the analysis, you got to be a relevant brand. If you're not a relevant brand, you're not going to be one of those that are analyzed. And there's 100 brands out there.
Yeah.
So branding is going to help you be relevant. But people are not motivated to do that. There's very few people that are actually going to do that, and they're sure as hell not going to do that before they buy soda pop or yogurt or select a grocery store. They're just not.
Yeah.
And so this model of the world is going to apply. It's only relevant to a few areas, like you're buying airplanes or automobiles. That's the only one time it's relevant. And even if you do, if you're going to buy an appliance, for example, and that you can do that, what do? You go on the internet. What do you ask them? You say, what are people saying? And
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and so you go to the movie that's popular by the people. You go to the appliance that. So when you're doing your research, that might be your first and only way to do research, and you're getting brands, right?
Yeah.
You're getting brand equity through these people, and so I think if anything, brands are more important than ever.
Yeah.
It gets you in the door, becoming relevant, and at the end of the day, you're going to go for your instinct. And when you develop this brand loyalty, you develop equity. They're sure as hell not going to do research to see if there's a better one. They're just not.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% agree on that, David. Okay, as we look to the next 5 to 10 years, what do you believe will be the single biggest challenge, single biggest opportunity, maybe for brand builders?
Well, I think the two that are on the table have a lot of a lot of ways to go to figure out how to deal with this communication environment, how to build brands, what works and what doesn't, and how to engage in disruptive innovation or how to respond to others that are engaging in your market arena. I think there's uh, a lot to be done in that area, and um, so I think that those two areas have got a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, to finish off, I have questions that I ask all my guests, David. So, my last guest was Will Butler Adams. He's a British businessman and CEO of Brompton Bicycle, better known for manufacturing the revolutionary folding bicycles that you see in and around the cities around the world. And Will said that he was anti-brand because he sees there's way too much brand washing these days. And as a consumer, his question was, how do you distinguish between the truths and the untruths of a brand?
Well, there's let me have two answers to that question. First, one of the strongest brand in the world is Muji. Are
Yeah,
you familiar with them?
I do. I
They're
know Muji. Yeah,
a wonderful brand that sells clothing and and uh, and uh, and sort of household gear like kitchenware and
yeah,
so on. And they
mindset.
even sell homes, and it's all functional. The clothing is all beige. I mean, the appliance is all vanilla. Just do the basic stuff.
Yeah.
And Muji stands for no
Yeah.
brand, no brand. They are
Okay.
the no brand company. Their clothing doesn't have brand on it, and no labels, and there's no logo, nothing. They're the no brand company. It's probably the strongest brand in the retail sector, and and all this stuff around no brands. They have two um, sort of nature areas out there, and they have soft music and you they have you almost like going into a meditation center to go shopping there. It's very calming.
Yeah.
It's a very strong brand.
Yeah, it is.
The no brand company is got a very strong brand. That's one thing. The second thing is that the idea that you're sort of putting forth stuff that's not true, and that's especially true in the social program space. So what people do is they will sort of magnify their donations by doing a splashing promotion. We'll give you so much of our sales will go to a charity, and that's regarded as cynically as they're just doing it for the money, and that could nothing could be truer. That's all they're doing. They're just doing it for the money. They want some extra sales, and they're doing that. And that's sort of one extreme. But you look at Dove with a real beauty program that's been going on for 18 years. That's done enormous good for women and girls, and these people have become a thought leader in the whole space of the definition of beauty, and they're committed over 18 years. This isn't a fall program. So if you have real passion, real commitment, real to the level of having thought leadership, you really understand what's going on, you're not going to be accused of being cynical.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the um, that's the key, is to have something that you have a long-term commitment with, and you have some passion and knowledge behind it.
Yeah. And otherwise it'll be very transparent that you're just putting it out there for
Yeah.
sale purposes. Next, just a couple of questions from listeners. Firstly, from Terry Vale, he's in Ontario, and he asks, what key piece of advice would you offer entrepreneurs regarding branding and building a successful business from scratch?
Well, I think you want to know what you stand for, and that'll change over time. But start out by saying, what are your brand pillars? What are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that really differentiate you, that'll resonate with customers, and that are credible, that you can pull off?
Yeah.
And then let them to be a vehicle to guide you. The other thing I would say is that I think um, the obvious uh, way to improve is to brand things, and it's true you can overbrand, but it's also true that most people underbrand. And we talked about this earlier, the idea about, if you need an endorser brand, think about getting one, getting somebody will stand up for you, maybe a customer or a celebrity or somebody, and and think about sub brands so that you can really be differentiated sharply and with punch, and not if the umbrella brand is not doing that, then think about sub brands, and think about uh, branding some of your features that might go across products, like the hybrid synergy drive for Toyota, for example, and and think about if you have a event or a sponsorship or something, think about branding it and manage that brand over time.
Yeah. Good advice. Next is from Sebastian Mark. He's in Los Angeles, and he asks, with all the change in the marketing world, what is one core principle from your early work that you find is more relevant today than ever?
Oh, that's a good question. Uh, well, I mean, I started in the branding with the following observation, that branding at that time was done by ad agencies who wanted a 3 word phrase that would um, that would guide their advertising campaign. And they also, and some of them had this checklist. They sometimes in a tree form, they would have boxes. Everybody had to fill in these boxes. I thought both of those were awful, and my whole mission in life was to destroy those two ideas. So first, brand is multidimensional. It's not a 3 word phrase, even though a 3 word phrase might prove useful. It's multidimensional. And second of all, the dimensions are unique to you. and there's no general set of dimensions that everybody has to have. You determine the dimensions for you. And so, with those two guidelines in mind, I think you should figure out what you want to stand for, how you're going to be differentiated, how you're going to resonate, and uh, what you can practically do.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
Well, I don't know. I am a big fan of Ted Levitt, who said that you're not in the train business, you're in a transportation business, and the idea is that you need to think broader than just making a product. And he also said that people don't buy drill bits; they buy holes and in the wood. And so think about what really the customer is buying, and not so much on what product you're making.
Yeah. Yeah. Always be customer centric, customer orientated in order to sell. And who would you like me to reach out to and invite to come on this podcast in the future?
Uh, oh, I don't know. And um, that's a really good question. I that's never been one of my problems because I don't do a podcast. Uh, but uh, I guess the people I would like to hear from are, um, people that have really done a good job with branding, like the people at Unilever. Um, and Unilever's got a new CEO, and it's I hope he keeps going their leadership in that area. But yeah, I always like to hear people that are. Um, I like to hear the closet academics in the real world. And there's always in marketing groups, there's always a few thoughtful, forward-looking people, and I always like to hear from them.
Yeah. Well, P&G are always put on a pedestal in terms of how they've managed their brand portfolio widely over the years. So we'll try and get the CEO or someone from there on, David, to ask the questions. Finally, my next guest is Daniel Pink. He's author of many books, including Drive, To Sell is Human, and The Power of Regret. And his TED Talk on motivation is among the most viewed of all time. What question would you like to ask Dan?
Gosh, you have to remind me, what was the question I posed?
So there was a couple that we were speaking about, but yeah, the question was, does building up or leveraging right brain talent give a person a way to be relevant in the AI age?
That was a good one, and that's one I came up with earlier. I knew I had some really good ones, and
Yeah,
but that's definitely one, and I think he would be a good person to answer that one.
yeah. Well, I will. I'll definitely pose that to him then. David, a huge thank you from me for joining today, just sharing your valuable expertise on branding and marketing. And over the years, I've learned so much from you. So hopefully, our listeners today have learned about the importance, of course, of brand equity, but how to craft effective brand strategies, the evolving nature of consumer behavior in the digital age, and your insights all the time reminding us that building this strong brand it's not just about recognition, it's about creating this lasting relationship with the customer, being customer centric. um, to the listeners, if you've enjoyed today's discussion, David's written many books. His latest book, Aaker on Branding, the second edition, is the purple book on the shelf there. But if people want to get in touch, how best should they do that?
Well, my email is daaker@prophet.com, prophet, Daaker.
Okay, that's excellent. And yes, everyone's on LinkedIn, so they could reach
Yeah,
out to you
yeah,
to you
yeah.
on there too. Well, David, thank you very much. It's on the run up to Christmas, so I wish you a happy Christmas for the holiday ahead, and thank you very much for all that you've done throughout your career. It really has shaped what I've learned and then implemented it in my career too.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, David. Looking back through my notes, what are the 3 key takeaways that I took from this conversation today? I think number 1, well, we need to start with David's 5 Bs model. Let's just remind ourselves of what those 5 Bs are. So they stand for brand equity, reminding us that brands are strategic assets, and brand equity, he talked about it being the umbrella asset, of which resides 3 of the remaining 4 Bs under this umbrella. So we've got brand relevance, and that's to do with visibility and credibility. David talked about high awareness not being enough. You do need to have that credibility too. We've got brand image, and that's guided by the brand vision it represents, the brand associations, and they should add intrigue and also differentiate from other brands. And then we've got brand loyalty, and this reminds us of the ongoing asset value of repeat customers based on brand engagement and the customer experience that's delivered. And then he talked about brand portfolio and the fact that a strong brand is part of a wider brand portfolio, and that could include sub-brands, co-brands, endorser brands. So use this structure for your brand strategy and you won't go far wrong. Secondly, David talked about brand purpose as an energizer, and I think that helps a brand have a higher calling, a sense of purpose that people admire and share values with. And he used the example of Dove Real Beauty campaign that took everyday people to show that they were more beautiful than they actually thought, and not only improved their self-esteem of tens of millions of women, but also drove growth for the business, drove sales from 2.6 to $6.5 billion. And finally, the question I posed to him from Scott Galloway about brands being on borrowed time. We all know the internet has fundamentally changed consumer behavior, whereby we have instant access to product information, peer reviews, comparison tools. But brand recognition does guide purchases. You just need to walk down a supermarket aisle to see how they influence your shopping basket. So trust and convenience, David said, still drive decisions, but brands can't coast on recognition alone. In the long run, only those that deliver on their promises will survive. But then that's always been the case. This is the last podcast before the Christmas break, so all I'm left to do is wish you, the listeners, a Merry Christmas, and look forward to sharing more World's Greatest Business Thinkers in 2026, starting with Daniel Pink. So look out for that one. Thank you.